So this video is coming just days after Google announced the new Pixel phones at their event, which was the most boring thing I've possibly ever watched.
Pixel 7 and Pixel 7 Pro's front camera uses our advanced machine learning models for face recognition to power face unlock.
And the 7 and 7 Pro looks very promising. However, a cool thing that happens whenever a new phone launches is that the old ones go down in price. I mean, you could already get a Google Pixel 6 Pro for under $600 used, but now that the new phones are out, they're probably going to tank in price even more. And the only reason I even have this thing is because a seller offered this mint condition example for $475. But in this video, I want to evaluate if buying Google's phone from last year is a good decision this year and moving forward. So let's get into it. The camera system on the Pixel 6 Pro is nothing short of amazing. It features an upgraded sensor, up from the same 12 megapixel sensor they've been using since the Google Pixel 2. In fact, they actually do still use it on the Pixel 6a, but I digress. But this means that you get twice the surface area for the sensor, meaning that a lot more light can get captured for the AI to play around with. I mean, it's basically impossible to get a bad shot with this thing, as long as you're using the main sensor. This also gets all the benefits of having a larger sensor on a phone. When you get close to objects, you get a natural depth of field without using any portrait effects. You also have better night mode and better image stabilization because there's more room for the sensor to move around. Compared to my Pixel 4a, which already had a great camera system, this is an incomprehensible upgrade. Images are super tacked and sharp, even in low light. And even if you're shaking your hands around, Google's already developed the algorithm to help unblur images, which really helps here. And if you place this phone on a tripod or just hold it really still, you can activate astrophotography mode, which is the most niche but underrated feature of the century. I mean, sure, you can point it at the sky and get some pretty decent results, but I also thought it was pretty neat to just put it into a low light room, keep it really still, and see what it would pump out. However, we're still talking about the main sensor here. There's an ultra-wide camera sitting right next to it, which isn't even that wide. It has a 17mm focal length, which could be considered ultra-wide, but many flagships, including the iPhone 13 and 14, and even the Pixel 7 Pro, feature a much wider 13mm focal length. And in addition to this, the sensor is about half the size it is on the main sensor, and you can tell. When you switch from the main to the ultra-wide, you can see it go grainy, which indicates a gigantic ISO setting. It takes longer to get good low-light photos, and even so, they're not as detailed as you get from the main sensor, even if they have the same megapixel count. And the situation only gets worse with the telephoto camera. It's a 4x optical zoom with 48 megapixels, and it has a predictably slow aperture. So if you wanted to rely on your phone to capture evening sports games, well, don't exactly rely on this thing replacing a Canon R3. However, the real rub for me with this camera is that I'm not sure why some of the software features introduced on the Pixel 7 shouldn't be possible here. I mean, the image unblur effect should be possible considering this does have a tensor chip. It might be a bit slower, but I'm pretty sure most people would prefer to have it than not. I mean, if you remember when the Pixel 3 came out, they introduced night mode, and they pretty easily backported that to the Pixel 2 because it used the same image sensor. So I'm not sure why the deep fusion, whatever technology they're using to get good zoom shots here, isn't possible on this phone.
Figure for the video quality test, we should actually use this camera. So we're gonna use a couple different modes here. This is the action mode. Like you could like run with the camera on it. Keeps it kind of stable actually. It's not too bad. I'm like legging it here, by the way. I'm just like, oh.
All right, so this is locked mode, which uses a 2x zoom to just like lock the scene in. I'm moving the camera around, as you can probably tell, but I keep it locked pretty well unless you like go outside of the bounds of the actual image. Also, guess who got almost completely done with making this video and forgot to talk about the front camera quality? It's fine. It's 11 megapixel, that's pretty wide and looks good. The microphone is pretty good too, I think. And the speaker on the bottom is also pretty solid. I don't know if you care about that. And now for productivity on the Pixel 6 Pro. At first, this was a mixed bag. I often thought that the enormous 12 gigabytes of RAM was a complete waste, because it felt like it just wasn't being used very much. I mean, I wasn't able to keep nearly as many apps open as I was expecting to. I even found that Chrome, a Google app, was struggling a lot with its workloads. Admittedly though, Android 13 fixed a lot of the woes with performance on the Pixel 6 Pro, including productivity. My main apps include Discord, eBay, Reddit, the camera app, maybe Gmail, and I was able to keep all of those apps open at the same time with no struggle. Even quickly switching around the multitasker feels smooth and fluid. The features that this phone launched with, like the Magic Eraser, live translation, and general super speedy performance, are still really nice to have, even though every company without a Tensor chip has copied them, but these features still do seem to work best with a Pixel. Google services like Google Pay, Maps, and Gmail all work better with this phone, and it's really refreshing to have apps that send you notifications that don't immediately clash. Right now? Seriously? Anyways, the Google services like Maps, Gmails, Reminders, and Pay all work best with this phone, and it's kind of refreshing to have a phone that doesn't have all of its apps clashing with fonts and UIs in the same operating system. It doesn't feel like these are apps, but more of just part of the phone experience. I've also come to enjoy the new Android 12 and 13 interfaces alike, and it reminds me a lot of how this phone is built in general. Not too complicated and nothing super duper crazy. And plus it even has an additional touch of Material You. However, I could criticize Android in this area because Material You also removed a lot of the customization features that people have come to enjoy. I mean, I can't even actually change the shape of the icons on my home screen anymore. I can't change the font even. It doesn't really make it feel like it's my interface, but more like an interface that's vaguely representative of what my background color looks like. A feature that's been around since Windows 8. And basically, unless you want to get a custom launcher and deal with all of that hassle, you're basically stuck with whatever they give you. So Pixel experience isn't exactly for everyone. You definitely have to get some second opinions before going all in on this phone. The only thing that might burst your regular consumer's bubble would be the screen. I mean, it's a pretty great screen on the face of it. It's 1440p, 6.7 inches diagonally, which is actually kind of huge, but you know, it's kind of how flagship phones are. It has 120Hz refresh rate, which looks silky smooth, and the UI keeps up with it just fine. It only gets up to like 500 nits in normal brightness, which is bright enough, but it's not as bright as you expect on a new flagship these days. It was dimmer than the S22 and the iPhone 13 when they launched. And again, this is another shortcoming that the Pixel 7 fixed. So if you want a brighter screen, then you're probably just going to have to go for the newer model. However, we might be viewing this phone from the wrong lens. The price of this phone suggests that it should be more mid-range, and the prices online reflect that. And now that the Pixel 7 is out, I think that makes the Pixel 6 Pro a better deal than it's ever been. But being a good deal isn't necessarily good value, so should you buy this? Well, that's a bit of a tough question, but I might be able to help you find an answer to it. On the used market in the United States, you can get a base model iPhone 12 for about the same price, or you can settle for a Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra, both of which are great options in their own right, but I think as far as bang for your buck goes, if all you're worried about is getting the most out of your money, this is it right here. I'm not even joking here. And I'd actually recommend this to people looking for a mid-range phone, because I think a lot of people shopping for mid-range phones want something that has all the flagship qualities but just at a lower price. And while there are many flagship killers out there, excluding OnePlus unfortunately, it might be a much better idea for some people to just buy an older flagship than rather buy something that's mid-range today. Because Android phones do depreciate a lot, especially Pixel phones. I've noticed that over the years. Google offers lots of software support with these phones. 3 years of software updates and then up to 5 years of security updates, which is plenty for most users who keep their phones around for a normal amount of time. While this phone has many great qualities, it's far from perfect. And in fact, it was probably one of the worst launches of 2021, as far as the launch goes. It was littered with bugs like a slow fingerprint reader, apparently dropped calls, and many other annoyances. However, the fortunate thing is that almost a year after its release, all of those bugs have been fixed. I love my Google, but there's just this one thing, and I don't know why. It doesn't even matter how hard you try. But the UI seems to just be everywhere it's not supposed to be, but nowhere where it should be. I'm not sure if these issues have been fixed in future updates since I had the issues, but I used to experience the keyboard literally popping up while I was getting a call, and that meant I literally could not physically take the call because the home keys were gone too. Several times I've also pulled my phone out of my pocket turned it on, and the screen was blank. The only way I could know the phone was on because the battery indicator was still there for some reason. But I literally could not unlock the phone unless I force restarted it. And this could kind of suck in emergency scenarios. You just whip out your phone to call 911, and your phone is just like, no. You don't get to call 911. You're mine now. But I don't agree with that. I think phones should be able to do whatever the hell you ask them to. And to be fair, 90% of the time, the phone does. But other phones can do that like 99.9% of the time. It's not really impressive to have the phone work most of the time you need it to. But one of the reasons that this phone legitimately scares me to use is because of the screen. I mean, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a reason I didn't show the screen in the intro sequence. It's because the screen looks like this. Yeah, I don't know how the hell this happened. I've treated this phone as delicately as possible. I never put it down on its face. I even had a screen protector on it for like 4 months of owning this. It might kind of be due to Gorilla Glass Victus maybe, and I guess it's a pro that it hasn't cracked yet. But I think I might even prefer cracked at this point. My old Pixel 4a went several months without a screen protector, and its screen was basically immaculate. This phone is not a durability kink to say the least, and I definitely should have gotten a case more substantial than this thing. I mean, the Pixel 5 was literally made out of soft rubber materials, and it could take a drop just fine. But this phone is entirely glass. I wouldn't trust it with anything. It's probably not really Google's fault though, because this is the design trend that every smartphone is taking these days. I mean, the only flagship I can think of that doesn't have a glass back is like the Zenfone 9. And while this might be a bit off topic, I don't know where else to talk about this, but the design of this phone is actually really solid. And while I was kind of skeptical about getting this like sunny color, I think, I like to think of it more of like as a gold color. And when I think of it as gold, it seems a lot more appealing. I like the way it shines and kind of stands out in the crowd, especially with this whole visor look that it has. And so with that kind of just leaves me with a final verdict statement, which is kind of difficult because I'm not the kind of person who could just afford to buy an iPhone 14 and a Pixel 7 for the sake of comparison and review. But the thing is, in my experience, if you're the kind of person who would genuinely benefit from the features that the new Pixel 7 offers, maybe you really care about that Face Unlock feature, sure, knock yourself out. Not like that. The main reason I even decided to upgrade my Pixel 4a in the first place is because, well, one, I had the money, and because my Pixel 4a had become slow on Android 12. Plus, the camera quality wasn't really cutting it for me anymore, which might sound kind of ridiculous because it has a great camera. But the main feature of this camera that I really wanted was literally this lens, the telephoto lens. I complained about it a lot in the review because it's not perfect, but the reality is that it's allowed me to get shots that I'd otherwise find impossible to get on a regular single lens camera system. If Google follows the same type of trend by keeping the same design around for about 2 or 3 years and then changing it a bunch, this phone will stay modern until at least 2025, which is a pretty long lifespan for a phone. But yeah, this is the Google Pixel 6 Pro, or what I like to deem 90% of the Google Pixel 7 Pro, but at half the price. And you should definitely be buying it in 2022. And this is Calc G, out.